Well, Razorback fans, the SEC basketball schedule has been released, which means we know the date for John Calipari's return to Rupp Arena. We're going to talk about that and get us some takeaways from the schedule. All that coming your way today on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, the Pod at the Palace edition. I'm Curtis Wilkerson, joined today by Andrew Ellis. Love talking a little ball with Andrew. This is also part of my master plan to infiltrate the Bombastic podcast when we get to baseball season, because I like talking a little baseball too. But Andrew, man, we got some good news, some basketball news with the SEC schedule dropping a couple days ago. Obviously, we're not going to bury the lead. John Calipari back to Rupp Arena February 1st. So I ask you, will Big Blue Nation roll out the red carpet for their Hall of Fame head coach, or are they going to shower that man with booze? What do you think?
Well, it's going to be very interesting because, frankly, we don't know how good either of these teams are going to be. But with Kentucky, I could see their season going a lot of different directions. So what will their record be that time on February 1st? There's a lot of time in between now and then. I imagine they're going to have plenty of time to get fired up for that one. With it being on a Saturday, I imagine that atmosphere is going to be rocking. They could be 2-20, and that atmosphere would still be going crazy. Roll out the red carpet might be a stretch. I don't know if it's going to be the warmest reception for Coach Calipari and his team, but I imagine Rupp Arena is going to be an impossible place to play that day, and so I look forward to it. It's going to be fun. I know you and I and John, we've kind of already made our plans. It's gonna be a fun week, man. I know that was like as soon as this schedule released, everyone did the quick scan to find out when that game was. We were really hoping it'd be on a Saturday. We got what we wanted. I feel like the timing works out kind of perfectly, and man, I'm already chomping at the bit to get up there.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. And I was kind of wondering, I had to assume that they were going to put that game on a Saturday. If they wouldn't have, it would have been a criminal act, almost as bad as not allowing these two teams to play twice in this regular season. But in terms of placement, in a way, I was like, well, it would have been cool if they would have done it, like the last Saturday of the regular season. Maybe a conference championship is on the line. Who knows? But you could have had those stakes. But I was listening to Aaron Torres talk about the timing, because February 1st, like it's, middle of the conference slate-ish. But what he was saying, if I remember correctly, that might be that week between the NFC and AFC championship games, and then the off week before the Super Bowl. And so you can kind of really take up the headlines. And I think it's going to, and, we talked about, are they going to boo him? What's going to happen? It'll be spattered and mixed around, but I don't get the sense that this is going to rival the Chris Beard taking Texas back to Lubbock after he spurned Texas Tech levels of vitriol. Mainly because I don't know that BBN has that in them. I mean, that level of rowdy was crazy. But I remember seeing, Texas getting off the bus. They pulled up for their shoot around or whatever. And, Texas Tech fans were just going crazy and shouting obscenities. And that place was absolutely nuts. It was a buzzsaw. And the circumstances are different, right? In the sense that, Beard had Texas Tech rolling, and then he just dipped out of nowhere to the bitter rival. Whereas despite a decade and a half run at Kentucky, it did feel like Cal and Kentucky, it was time. It was almost like a mutual parting of ways, right?
Right. And I mean, you think about it, like most Kentucky fans, if you had told them a year ago, hey, Coach Cal's going to leave after this season, will you boo him when he comes back? They probably all would have said, no, I don't have any ill will, but they agree with what you're saying, where it was kind of time. It felt like not a mutual decision, but it felt like it was a situation where both parties weren't going to be too upset about their breakup happening. So in a nutshell, yeah, it's not like Kentucky fans should have a ton of crazy animosity or anything like that. But Curtis, as well as I do, Big Blue Nation really has not enjoyed Arkansas being in the headlines. They have really not enjoyed watching Cal go on this PR tour and kissing the babies and hugging all the politicians and all that. They don't like that. And so depending on how good this Arkansas team is, just think about if Arkansas is still in that maybe top 10, top 15 range when they go to Lexington. Kentucky fans are going to be pretty heated up for that one. And so I think that regardless of how they actually feel about Cal and regardless of how they're going to feel about him in the years to come, they're going to get up for this one. But I agree, it will be a little bit of a weird reception. I bet there's going to be some fans who want to kind of give him a little standing ovation, give him his props and all that. But my gut feeling, I feel like they're just going to be sick to their stomachs watching Arkansas this year. And so by the time that February game rolls around, there's going to be enough hate in their hearts to fill up that entire arena.
And he's also probably going to drive some of them nuts by the way he just leans into everything. He's so good at commanding a room. He's going to be walking around, Rupp Arena like he still owns the place, kind of. Oh, John, good to see you. Oh, Ralph, how's it going, my man? It's almost like he's still in charge over there. That's going to rub some people the wrong way, but it's just like by
Tell
nature.
your mother I said hi.
Yeah, exactly. That's coming. Let me ask you this, or let me at least make this statement. I think that given the national reaction to this game being released with the date and everything like that, that this might be the most highly anticipated regular season college basketball game since Coach K's last game at Cameron Indoor against North Carolina. Am I crazy for thinking that?
Wow, that is bold, but I don't think you're that crazy for it. I mean, I think just everyone in college basketball, I would imagine, has been seeing the back and forth between these two fan bases, and it being so far away still gives you plenty of time to kind of build to it. And so I think by the time we get to that game, especially if both teams end up being what we think they're going to be, pretty good teams, it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, you're thinking 2 top 15, top 20 matchups. And also, Curtis, we've attended a good bit of Arkansas Kentucky games. It always kind of feels that way, even before all this stuff went down. And so this just only adds to it. And so, yeah, I don't think you're crazy at all. I think the eyes of the country are going to be on Arkansas a lot of this year, but I think in this particular matchup, it's going to be something that everyone's talking about. And man, I really can't wait for it.
I can't either. I'm really looking forward to it. And there's another layer to this matchup that I want to bring up that we're going to get into. So everybody stay tuned to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Are you taking that dream vacation this summer but dreading the cost? With Ibotta, you get cash back on all your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight that you've been eyeing, or that fancy dinner that you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, though, you earn cash back that you can withdraw from your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipts, and voila, the money's yours. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back. And remember, use that code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. All right, Andrew, continuing our discussion here on this Arkansas-Kentucky matchup, I'm curious as to who you would say has the most pressure on their shoulders to win this game when we get to that point. I mean, is it going to be the guy who bolted for greener pastures that are filled with Tyson chickens, or is it going to be the former alum who is now replacing the Hall of Famer?
Well, Curtis, I got to quote a legend, Israel Adesanya, who did come up short in his most recent title fight, but he said one time, and it stuck with me, you got to know sometimes when it's someone else's story, when it's someone else's moment. That's a big part of sports of, we all kind of view things through a selfish lens and we want to win every game and all that. But in my opinion, when Cal goes to Kentucky, this is kind of their moment a little bit. Obviously, it's going to be a big moment for Cal, but you think about how crazy that crowd is going to be. I think there's a lot of pressure on Kentucky, and it's because of how personal they've made this, where Arkansas fans, obviously, I'm not going to say that Arkansas fans haven't been fanning those flames a little bit, but it's not like Arkansas is really mad at Mark Pope or they're really mad at the Kentucky basketball program. In fact, Arkansas fans are probably trying to spin this and be like, hey, Cal, we're saving you from what those Kentucky Wildcats have done to you. And so I honestly feel like there's a lot of pressure on Kentucky in this matchup. Of course, if Arkansas loses this game, Coach Cal is going to get, yelled at. He's going to get made fun of. He's going to get chirped, and they're going to dance on his grave and all that. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to matter much in the long run. I think that, especially when you're talking about two teams that are probably going to have a nice little RPI, BPI, net ranking, whatever you want to call. I don't think there's going to be too many consequences for either team if they lose this game. And I just can't imagine, because I mean, if Arkansas loses that game, sure, you lose on the road at Kentucky, not ideal. Then you got to go to Texas right after. That's not, not great circumstances. But imagine the inverse. Imagine if Arkansas goes in there and whips up on Kentucky. That's a devastating gut punch for that fan base and for that team and just their program. Like it would look a lot worse, I feel like, if Arkansas went in there and made quick work of them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I do wonder one thing, because this kind of gives me vibes of Eric Musselman's first year at Arkansas when Kentucky came to town. And that was the game, obviously, where Cal got ejected and Arkansas blew it down the stretch because Kenny Payne went to his own defense. Whatever, they lost that game, but Muss referenced that game so many times saying, there's just something about moments like that and the anticipation of huge games like that. That you really have to mentally prepare yourself in the build up to it to be ready for what you're about to experience. So you don't get overhyped and then you're drained going out there from a mental standpoint. And they worked on that and they got better at it. And I wonder, Mark Pope is such a high energy kind of guy. And this is like, they're going to have some big games leading up to that point, whatever, but this is going to be for him an entirely different experience. And I wonder if they run the risk of that overhype and the moment being a little bit too big for them, and not necessarily the players. They've got experienced guys. It's a veteran team. But that kind of atmosphere, that kind of situation, it's going to be a little bit different. Whereas Coach Cal's kind of faced that everywhere he's gone for the last 15 years because of who he is. This will be on a little bit different level, different circumstances. But I feel like Cal, the head coach, is better equipped to handle something like this than Mark Pope, the head coach. Who knows how it's going to play out? But the other thing here, the Cal factor, Andrew, is such a huge storyline that people forget what this is going to be like for DJ Wagner and Adu Thiero and Big Z, right? Three guys who were prominent figures on that Kentucky team last year that was so good during the regular season, the number one offense in the country. And then they get punked by Oakland in the round of 64. Then their coach dips. Do I stay here? Do I follow him? What do I do? That's going to be weird for them too. Whereas I don't think any of Coach Cal's players, former players, are still at Kentucky. I think just one former commit in Travis Perry.
Yeah, I think the big game feel is a big aspect of this. And to your point, Curtis, Cal has so much experience in that. And frankly, this Arkansas team, it's not like February 1st is the first big date we have circled on their calendar. They've got a big Thanksgiving matchup. They've got a big game in Madison Square Garden in December. They've got Tennessee to open up conference play. Like, Arkansas is going to have some big game experience. And look, Kentucky, I'm sure, has plenty of notable matchups on their schedule as well. But sure. I think where it lies on the schedule, you'd like to think that both teams are starting to really find their stride. Because how often does that happen where we have a big game that happens in November, December, and then you look back later in the year, you kind of forgot it happened. I think the way that this lines up, it's going to be kind of all roads leading to February 1st. And so I can't wait to see how both teams kind of evolve over the year and how prepared they are for that matchup. And frankly, Curtis, I know we're planning on talking about some of the rest of this SEC schedule. You look at where it lies for Arkansas. You have two relatively manageable home games against Georgia and Oklahoma leading into it. But after that Kentucky game, you go right on the road to Texas in Austin and play in the Moody Center. And then you got to come back home and face Alabama. I think that Kentucky game is going to be a huge test for Arkansas mentally, physically, all of that. And it kind of sets the stage for this run that obviously they're going to hope to go on in March, but this stretch of big games that they're going to have after that too.
Man, it's August. The game's not until February. It's months away, but we're already booked for the trip, and we're getting into the weeds of this matchup. It's like Mike McDaniel famously.
We're going to start doing that.
Oh, yeah, man. It's like the Mike McDaniel quote, this only gets bigger from here, all right? I mean, it's only going to become a bigger deal the closer we get to it. But you touched on some of these other games on the schedule, and we're definitely going to talk about those in our final segment, so stay tuned. Hey, Locked On Razorback fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. It's Ultimate College Football Head Coach. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Could you imagine being the head coach of the Razorbacks? I think a lot of you do that every single day as it is, right? Well, here's your chance now. From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Would you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays during the game. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but it'll shape the future and the legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free. It has no ads and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want to and when you want to. And of course, we've got a special offer for Locked On Razorbacks fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's in all caps, Locked On CFB, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, back for the final segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, the Pod at the Palace edition. Yeah, we talked a lot about Arkansas and Kentucky, and rightfully so. That's the game everybody's been excited about. Everybody's been thinking about it since Cal left for Fayetteville. There's 17 other SEC games that have to be played, Andrew. So let's get into some superlatives here, some of the things that really kind of stand out to us in terms of what we're looking for and what we're looking forward to in this schedule. Aside from that Kentucky game, easy question to start. Which game on the schedule excites you the most?
Well, it's hard to look past number one on the schedule. And I don't say that as a let's take it one game at a time. I mean, literally, Arkansas, arguably the toughest game on this schedule, is on the road at Tennessee, January 4th, right off the bat. So
Love it.
No easing into SEC play. It's hard for me to look past that one, but you have the two matchups with Texas that are both going to have some heat and animosity to them. And I think that Alabama game, that February 8th, that home game against Alabama, it's got to be the best home game on the schedule, period. But yeah, those are kind of the two that stick out to me off the bat.
Yeah, for sure. That Tennessee game is going to be awesome. I mean, in a way, I would like to say, well, welcome to the SEC, Coach Calipari, but he's been there forever. But for your debut at Arkansas in the SEC to go on the road to Thompson-Boling Arena is going to be a lot of fun. And then, yeah, the storylines are there, man. Jonas Adu goes back to his old squad, who he helped lead to a game away from a Final Four last season. So that'll be a lot of fun. Definitely looking forward to that one. Yeah, you're 100% right. I would have gone either with that Tennessee game or the Alabama game at home. I mean, it's an Alabama team that's they could be number one in the country at that time. Hate to say it for all you Nate Oates haters out there, but they're really, really good. And Arkansas gets that one at home. It's a Saturday in Bud Walton Arena on a home schedule, quite frankly, that it lacks a little bit of pop. I'm not going to lie in terms of the marquee matchups there. Maybe they can pull something off with one of the last few games here in the non-conference slate, but it's not the best home slate in the world, but it's hard to beat a home game against the Alabama Crimson Tide. So let me ask you this. Let's take let's go top three home games that we like on this schedule.
Okay. Well, that Alabama game, certainly sky high. That's got to be number one right there off the bat. I really like the Texas game, which is, it's going to be a midweek situation. So maybe not the most ideal circumstances for like the best crowd, but that late in the year, you'd imagine people are going to be locked on with basketball. And so they'll be ready to roll for that one. And then also early in conference play, number two, or that number three for me, I think is that Ole Miss game, the second game on the schedule. You welcome Chris Beard, who everyone remembers for about 24 hours. We all kind of thought that was a done deal. He was going to be the head coach of Arkansas. We had no idea what kind of domino effect that was going to lead to, but yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of intensity for that one. I imagine Ole Miss is going to be a good tournament type of team, and so there should be a lot of excitement for that, and especially depending on how that Tennessee game plays out. If you're able to go pick up a big win against Tennessee to start SEC play, you come home and face Ole Miss and face Chris Beard. I imagine that place is going to be rocking for that one.
Yeah, no doubt. The Alabama and Texas games have to stand out at the top. I do like that Ole Miss game for all the reasons that you said there. That probably would have been my pick, but I got to be a little bit different here for the sake of the content, right? Give me maybe Oklahoma, just as the newcomer into the league. We've had all those weird games at the BOK Center in Tulsa. I don't think Oklahoma is going to be that good, but it's just a new opponent, man. It's one that you don't get to see too often in Bud Walton Arena. And also I like the idea of Arkansas, Oklahoma becoming a pretty solid rivalry. They try to do that with Arkansas and Missouri just because they're close together, but it's always felt weird. I think it's a more natural rivalry now for Arkansas and Oklahoma across the sports in the SEC. So that would be something I'd be excited to see there. The top three road games, we're going to take Kentucky out of the equation here because we talked about them so much. You mentioned Tennessee. I think that one's really, really hard to beat. But man, the two that really jump out to me after that, at Auburn, who I think is going to be really, really good this year. The Jungle's a wild place to play under Bruce Pearl. And then, man, take your pick between a couple here, but maybe at Texas, maybe they can go back to the Moody Center and get some revenge from that beatdown they took in an exhibition a couple years ago.
Yeah, if you look at the schedule and you're trying to forecast and do the wins and losses game and start adding them up and doing it in your brain, there's a lot of 2-game road stretches. I mean, that's usually how the schedule lays out, but there's a lot of 2-game road stretches that really are going to be tough for anybody to manage. You start off, I mean, your first real road trip of SEC play, you're playing at LSU, at Missouri. You'd imagine Arkansas is going to be favored in both of those games, but
it's a great way to start.
Yeah, I mean, a great way to start. I mean, if in terms of the road, then you have the Kentucky-Texas games that are both going to be on the road, both going to be really tough. That 2-game stretch, though, against A&M and Auburn, I feel like is kind of flying under the radar when we talk about this schedule, just because everyone kind of gravitates to Alabama, gravitates to Kentucky, and you see that Tennessee game right off the bat. But if I'm looking for a spot where Arkansas could maybe slip up, that at A&M on February 15th, followed by at Auburn the following midweek, like that's going to be a really tough stretch there. And then you kind of close it out with a very similar situation to how you start SEC play at South Carolina, at Vanderbilt. You imagine those are going to be pretty manageable. But yeah, I really like the A&M and Auburn games. Arkansas has had their fair share of beef with both programs, and those coaches have been there for a while now, and so it kind of adds to it. I don't know if Calipari has the same disdain for Buzz Williams that Eric Musselman had, but yeah, I think some of those games really stick out to me. But A&M Auburn is the one that I feel like nobody's really talking about. That 2-game stretch it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, that's absolutely brutal. And you're 100% right that probably the two toughest stretches there on the schedule is that week where you're at Kentucky, at Texas, and then you get Alabama at home. And then shortly after that, you got the at A&M and at Auburn. So with that in mind, I always look at like, where's a possible place that Arkansas could slip up that you wouldn't expect it? Is there a trap game in there? Well, I don't think there's any better looking trap game than the one that's sandwiched in between those two runs, right? You go at Kentucky, at Texas, Alabama, and then before you take that road swing to A&M and Auburn, you got LSU just conveniently sandwiched between all those games. That is one that Arkansas is going to have to really bring their A game for and not overlook. They could be on an emotional letdown after some really, really tough games before, and then they're staring down a really, really tough road trip after that. I don't think LSU is going to be very good. That's going to be a tricky, tricky spot for Arkansas there. Do you see any other potential trap games maybe on the schedule?
I do. I think March 1st at South Carolina, and South Carolina is a team that, frankly, we were all wrong about last year. We all undersold the Gamecocks. We all didn't really believe they were going to achieve what they achieved in the regular season. And so I look at this whole schedule and this run that you're detailing. Let's say Arkansas passes all these massive tests with flying colors. You beat Kentucky. You somehow beat either A&M or Alabama or Texas. You have this whole tough road trip with A&M, Auburn. You come home, you whip up on Missouri. You get up, your fan base gets excited for the Texas game. And then you got to go on the road to South Carolina after you've endured this whole stretch. And so you maybe have a little bit of an exhale of like, okay, we've gotten through the dog days. We're ready to roll. It's March. It's time to look ahead. You start looking ahead to the tournament once that calendar flips to March. And then you got to face a Gamecocks team that really overachieved last year. And so I'm not going to discount Lamont Paris and his squad again this year.
Yeah, there you go. There you have it, folks. A full schedule breakdown for you in August. You think Arkansas fans are excited for basketball season? I would say they probably are. But that's going to do it for today's episode. For Andrew Ellis, this has been Curtis Wilkerson with the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, the Pod at the Palace edition. We will catch you guys at the same place tomorrow afternoon.